Welcome to African American History Lesson 10. Today we are going to talk about why Africans went to Europe and why Europeans went to Africa before the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. In the late 15th century, trade between West African kingdoms and Portugal for gold, goods, and enslaved people grew steadily, bypassing the trans-Saharan trade routes. African kingdoms increased their wealth and power through slave trading, which was a common feature of hierarchical West African societies. Portuguese and West African trade increased the presence of Europeans in West Africa and the population of sub-Saharan Africans in Iberian port cities like Lisbon and Seville. African elites, including ambassadors and the children of rulers, traveled to Mediterranean port cities for diplomatic, educational, and religious reasons. In these cities, free and enslaved Africans also served in roles ranging from domestic labor to boatmen, guards, entertainers, vendors, and knights. Many people do not realize that slavery existed in West Africa before the arrival of Europeans. However, the system of slavery was much different than that employed in the 18th and 19th centuries in the United States, Europe, and South America. Enslaved people were generally not bought and sold to wealthy individuals. Instead, enslavement was usually the result of having been captured in war. Additionally, West African slaves were not confined to large plantations as was the case in the American South. The status of enslaved people was much like that of the serfs of medieval Europe, who were required to work the land or perform other duties for a particular ruler. Slavery at this time was not associated with race or skin color. Religion and political loyalties were more important in determining who might be enslaved. The Portuguese were responsible for the invention of the Caravel, a light sailing ship that was suitable for long voyages. By using the Caravel for exploration, Portuguese mariners were able to find faster and cheaper trade routes around the southern tip of Africa. This enabled the Portuguese to establish a network of trading posts along the southern coast of Africa. However, they required labor to build the forts as well as forces to help in fortifying them. Enslaved people were an important factor during this period of expansion for Portugal's trading activity. In the mid-15th century, the Portuguese colonized the Atlantic islands of Cabo Verde and São Tomé, where they established cotton, indigo, and sugar plantations. This further increased the demand for slave labor. By 1500, about 50,000 enslaved Africans had been removed from the continent to work on Portuguese-colonized Atlantic islands and in Europe. These plantations became a model for slave labor-based economies in the Americas and would lead to the development of the transatlantic slave trade which began in the 1600s. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, share the video on social media, or leave a comment. Also, please consider subscribing to the channel at Quietly Radical on YouTube. Finally, please tune in for Lesson 11 where we will talk about African explorers in the Americas.